first time. I've had this book for quite a few years, and I've never really done anything with it until I started playing street guitar. Now, why did I zoom in on one little sticky note in this book? Well, if you can't tell by how just kind of crazy this book or this copy has gotten. Got a lot of sticky notes in here for the street guitar story. You might be familiar, if you are a longtime viewer of this channel, with street guitar, which I will link somewhere up here. Street guitar, or street guitar rewritten in some cases, which basically is the story of a young woman, Angeline, or Eve, as I like to nickname her, Eve. She goes and finds this guitar absolutely covered with the signatures of all sorts of different bands and musical groups out there. And she finds this thing like in an alley, absolutely abandoned, terrible condition. But it's obviously well loved. It's covered in signatures from all sorts of groups. Like, this thing is practically half Sharpie. Why would somebody throw this away? And that is what the street guitar is all about. Basically figuring out the mystery of what's up with this guitar, why it was abandoned, how it got here, and what these signatures really are. So, yeah, this basic plot has stuck with this project since I started really messing around with this project in the early 2010s, and has stuck with it through now into the mid-2020s. But there's a problem, which made me turn to this book, this little self-help writing book. No matter how much I wrote this plot, no matter how many times I rewrote this project, it just didn't work out. It never worked out. I would get to either the first few chapters of discovering the guitar, or just into the travel in Scotland, where the adventure really begins, or the history of this guitar really begins, and I'd just be stuck. I'd be completely stuck. I'm never sure where to quite go with the story from there. How to go through all of these different bands and groups that would sign this guitar, and the history behind it, and how Drew, the secondary character, the friend of Evangeline, who really kicks off this adventure and knows a lot more about this than Evangeline does. But once we united with Drew, I had no idea where to go with this, and the story would get stuck so many times in this spot. No matter how many times I reworked it, no matter how many times I rewrote it, it just wouldn't work. So, I'm sorry if you can hear the train in the background, but yeah. So I dug out Save the Cat Writes a Novel because I was like, I've tried other plot structures there, just like your basic plot structure of like, oh hey, you got your introduction, your inciting incident, your denouement, the climax, the, not all in that order, but whatever, basic plot structure. But likes to have a bunch of structure to my plots. I like to think of my writing as a sort of Goldilocks and the Three Bears kind of plotting routine. I can't have too much information. I can't have too little information. I gotta have just right. And I thought that Save the Cat Writes a Novel would be way too much. Way too much information. Because everybody kept talking about this 15-beat structure and how it was such an amazing, in-depth plotting structure. And I couldn't, until just a few days ago, I didn't want to get into it because I thought that it would completely destroy whatever story I tried to plot with it. But as you can see, I've got a fair few sticky notes, and I've even got a pile of transparent sticky notes. You know, these transparent sticky notes were what I first used in an initial read-through of Save the Cat. I just did it as I read through Save the Cat for the first time, and figured I'd go back later. And going back later is where we get all of these little blue sticky notes. And I think through that I have what I hope is a much better, more cohesive story. Now, there are some things that I'm not entirely sure about. Like, so for the Save the Cat Writes a Novel, you've got this basic beat structure of the opening image, the theme stated, the catalyst, break into Act 2, the B story, midpoint, all is lost, or everything has gone to crap, the break into Act 3, and the final image. With some setup, debate, some fun games, bad guys close in, Dark Night of the Soul, and the finale in there as well. But, yeah, so there are some things where I'm not entirely sure about it, like the theme stated. I've heard people sing the praises many times over of Save the Cat and Save the Cat Writes a Novel, but I feel like stating the theme is going to be a very delicate thing that can easily be just overdone, overstated. And I kind of question it, you know? It could be really easy to go into very preachy territory with that. So, yeah, there are some beats that I'm not entirely sure about. And obviously, just like with any structure, you can kind of mess around with it, and I might very well do that. But, yeah, I hope that Save the Cat Writes Novel was what really got me from just girl discovers guitar full of signatures mystery to what I really want to be. Almost, I guess, the closest comparison that I currently have is Turtles All the Way Down. Because, in Turtles All the Way Down, it touches on OCD and a mystery as well. Except that's a bit different. It's not exactly the world traipsing mystery that street guitar is. And I'm okay with that. But I do have Evangeline discovering who she is and her own, going through her own struggles I still can have some struggles with OCD as well, but I mostly have it under control, and I feel like there needs to be more media about this disorder and what it's like dealing with it, coping with it, trying to figure out what's going on. Because I want to do something where it's more of a discovering OCD. Now, what she's dealing with is OCD rather than what you have in Turtles All the Way Down, which is, at least to my recollection, more of a, hey, I know I have OCD and it's bad, and here's my way of dealing with it. What I want Straight Guitar to be is a discovery of OCD and some common themes. I want to be an introduction about OCD but in a novel. So I want it to be Evangeline and her struggle with OCD and a little bit of aromantic representation in there as well. Her discovery of her own aromanticism or aromantic identity as well. And of course the mystery of this guitar that is covered in signatures that she finds in the back of an alley somewhere. And this guitar is something that, this mystery is something that consumes her, that along with her other struggles are catalysts to the adventure and are what make her lose her jaw, or what make her really decide that, hey, no, I have to pursue this. I have to figure this out. It's because there's no other way forward other than figuring out this mystery, because it cost her everything. It cost her so much, so she's invested, she's in it now. And so, yeah, I have this story a lot more plotted out, I think, of her struggle with OCD, her discovery of the guitar, that kind of just like obsession, messing with her life, screwing with her life, just making everything fall apart, and thus the attempt to solve the mystery and build her life back up again, and figure out what's going on with this mystery, with her OCD, with her, and discovering her aromantic identity through this adventure as well. At this time, this isn't a story that I'm going to be publishing anywhere, especially not in early stages, but I think it would be really cool to get it out somewhere eventually. I think that this is a really important thing that needs more media. OCD representation needs more media. Aromantic identity needs more media representation. And while I have seen other representations of OCD, I feel like John Green with Turtles All the Way Down was the big one. I mean, the novel, the movie, I feel like it's one of the big ones when it comes to OCD representation, and I would love to keep going on that as another person with first-hand experience with this disorder. So this is where I'm at with this, is I am restarting this project with hopes that this Save the Cat Writes novel structure, this beat sheet, will really help this become a project that is in a more finished form than it's ever been. To answer a few questions that I don't know if anybody else is going to ask, but I want to answer a few questions up front. So OCD, if you don't know, obsessive compulsive disorder, basically it focuses around these obsessions, these anxiety-inducing obsessions of things that are bad, wrong, going to go wrong in life. Like, classic one is checking compulsions. That it might start with a thought of, what if I left the stove on? Maybe I left the stove on. I should go check to see if I left the stove on, the burner on, because if I don't, it's gonna start a fire, the house is gonna burn down, I'm not gonna have a home, and it just spirals down and down and down and down and down. And in order to stop this anxiety spiral, you do a compulsion, like in this case checking that this stove, the burner, isn't on, and that will provide a small, temporary sense of relief. But eventually that concern, that obsession will come back, because it just gets stuck in your brain of, okay, I checked it, but what if I didn't check it properly? What if it really is on and I didn't see that? And it just keeps going. So you keep going to check, and it takes up minutes, hours, days of your time. So much mental energy, so much. It's such a can be such an all-consuming thing. These obsessions and the time you spend on compulsions, especially if you repeating these compulsions over and over and over and over again to try to relieve that anxiety. Because even though the compulsions are there to stop that anxiety, it's only temporary. It's only a small thing, a small amount of relief before that obsession comes back, because it's an obsession. It keeps a hold on your brain. And really the main way of dealing with that, with OCD, is through a method called exposure response prevention therapy, or ERP therapy, which it sounds absolutely crazy, it sounds absolutely bonkers, but it is basically all about not doing those compulsions, letting that anxiety sit and run its course, because eventually it will die down, even though it seems like the end of the world and like you're going to burn down the house and everything's going to go terribly wrong. With OCD, those obsessions do eventually fade if you leave them, but if you keep doing these compulsions, keep feeding into the OCD loop over and over and over again, it doesn't end. And it's never just one thing, it's never just one obsession. It's never just about the burners on the stove. It's about the locks on your car. It's about, for me, it's been about saying things correctly, or saying things in a proper tone. It can be around getting obsessed around identity, or honestly, OCD obsessions can, while they are often grouped into different themes, like checking, or symmetry, or having something just right, I truly think that OCD can be a disorder that can focus around anything. It can latch on to whatever insecurity you might have, or that your brain can come up with, and just get stuck like that. It's not all just about, you often see OCD be considered a disorder of cleanliness, or disorder of cleaning, all about washing your hands, or all about organizing just so. But that's really not all it is. While that can be a common theme, yes, and I have dealt with that cleaning or that contamination OCD theme myself in the past, that's far from the whole story when it comes to OCD and what this disorder is and what this disorder can be for so many people. And I kind of want to break free of that mold because while I think that Turtles All the Way Down did an amazing job for spreading awareness about OCD, it did have that focus on cleanliness, on contamination OCD. Ava was a person with contamination OCD as a contamination OCD or a contamination theme for her OCD. And I kind of want to break free of that as an OCD theme in this book. Instead, I guess I'm still having a common theme of just right OCD or, that organization or having things just so, which, yes, I am kind of feeding into a stereotype with that, but I'm wanting to portray it just a little bit differently. I also plan to have OCD themes around ways to prevent bad luck, like around luck, or like things like avoiding black cats or opening umbrellas indoors, that kind of thing. But also, I'm not entirely sure what to call this theme, but I've noticed it a lot in the OCD community, and it has been something for me that has occurred a lot, which is what I like to call OCD sets. For my main character, Evangeline is going to be doing things in sets of 4. It's going to be doing things in sets of 4 just so. No, this is something I personally have experience with, as I like to call mine sets of 7, which is doing things 7 times in a row, which I think technically it kind of overlaps with just right OCD, at least for me, in that I have to do things 7 times in just the right way in order for the OCD ritual, for the compulsion to be done correctly, or for that sense of relief to happen. And I've seen this a lot with different people, different numbers of times. Like maybe it's washing your hands 4 times just so, or maybe it's checking that the door is locked 4 times in just the right way. So, like I said, it kind of overlaps with just right OCD, but I do kind of plan to have it be almost its own little mini beast, as it were. Its own challenge to overcome. So, I'm going to have sets of 4 ways to prevent bad luck, just right, or order OCD, as it were. Everything is done in a particular order, or else they aren't right. And checking OCD, checking things to prevent danger, which is going to also be seen OCD is not some kind of secret superpower or some secretly good thing that's happening to people. No. It is, at the end of the day, a mental illness. It is a mental health struggle that many, many, many people deal with around the world. There are so many different themes that people deal with around OCD. The themes around religion, around checking that things are just right, around contamination, like we've discussed, around just countless kinds of OCD out there. And I want to be clear that none of this is, that OCD is not a good thing. It's not something to be praised. And I do not intend to have that as a theme or something that happens in the novel that I am writing. OCD is still a struggle. It is still a challenge to overcome, to deal with, to cope with. Stray Guitar isn't a novel where the protagonist just magically overcomes their struggles. It isn't a story where OCD is secretly a good thing. Oh my gosh. No, that is not the story I'm here to tell. And I genuinely do not believe that OCD is or should be seen as a good thing. It is a struggle that many people, myself included, have had and continue to struggle with for years and years. Some of us, it's for our entire lives. I don't want to speak to everybody, but yeah, for a lot of us, it's a lifelong disorder. It's a lifelong problem. And I do want to reflect that within Street Guitar. At the end of the day, Evangeline is still going to have to deal with OCD. At the end of the day, she's going to be aromantic, and those aren't just magically things that are going to disappear. Being aromantic isn't a bad thing. It isn't a problem to be solved. It is a romantic orientation. Just like being biromantic or heteroromantic. Just like any other romantic identity, aromanticism, being aromantic is just a part of who someone is, and it's not something to be cured. It's not something that will be cured. And that isn't a bad thing. But I also want to have OCD as that, hey, this also isn't something that necessarily may be cured, but it is a bad thing, and I want to have that balance. These two things in the story that are explored alongside this mystery of this guitar, how it ended up in Canada, and how it originated in Scotland, how it got all these signatures, how it ended up where it did, potentially kind of what it is to be a fan of a musical group, or especially groups that have disbanded or don't exist. They have albums, or EPs or music, but they aren't currently making music. They aren't currently making a product. I want to explore that side of being a fan as well. So those are some of the things I want to explore in this novel, is acceptance of identity, being able to learn about, acknowledge, and cope, and how to cope with mental illness like OCD. Those are some of the things I want to explore in the Street Guitar, and I hope that with this Save the Cat beat sheet that I can actually do that. this to be a fun road trip, but I also want this to be a not preachy, educational, but like a journey of self-discovery and learning for the main character and maybe the audience. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want this to be preachy, but I want this to be real. Yeah, I want to mix in some real experience, fictionalized real experience within this fun adventure. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So I've used the Save the Cat beat sheet to hopefully plot this out a little bit more. It's still not like a full chapter by chapter breakdown, but I do have an idea of the general plot structure. I'm hoping that this will lead to a more final project. A product and project, I suppose. But I don't know how much more I'll talk about this in future videos, but I thought I'd give an update. And I want to know, let me know down in the comments, have you used the Save the Cat beat sheet or the Save Cat Writes a Novel beat sheet? What do you think of it? What ways have you transformed this beat sheet in order to work on your own projects? And what are you working on right now? Let me know. I'd love to hear. Even if you just say, hey, I'm working on a Western novel, or I'm working on a sci-fi project. I want to know. Let me know down in the comments. And well, this wasn't a very classic ASMR video. I hope this ramble update was fun. And if you have questions about OCD or Aromanticism, just let me know. Leave them down in the comments and I'll see what I can do to help educate. As someone with those lived experiences, I will not support any queerphobia down in the comments. Those will be deleted, but I hope that you enjoyed this video and this writing update. And as always, I wish you